Today's reading is from Isaiah chapter 2, beginning with the first verse. The word that Isaiah, son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All the nations shall stream to it. Many peoples shall come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord."
Thank you, Dawn. For some time now, the denomination of which we are a part, the United Church of Christ, has had a motto, and it says, "God is still speaking." You've seen that, sure. God is still speaking. In other words, the whole message of Christ, of the Judeo-Christian tradition, is not some old story we just keep telling, but God is still speaking. Well, when was the last time anybody in this room heard God's voice? Oh, good, I don't have to refer anybody. Okay. No, seriously, that's words. God is still speaking. My problem has always been with that motto, my problem has always been that it tries to resurrect something that the Hebrew people lived with. They believed it unquestionably, and they practiced it. And that was that every time you spoke a word, especially if you spoke someone's name out loud, you made it live. It is said, and it's probably true, that for a long time there was very little gossip in the Hebrew world, because if you talked about someone and mentioned their name, they were right there. You see how that would work? But see, language was for the Hebrews, in a way that we have lost, a living thing. So the idea that words made a difference, that words really kind of lived their own life and you could become a part of that life, was very important to them. So God is still speaking in that sense of the word, means that our Creator is still creating. I like that better. You've heard me say that. Our God is still creating. Well, let's think about that in light of today's scripture. How many of you really heard what Dawn said right at the beginning, in the first part of the first verse of the second chapter of Isaiah? It talks about Isaiah, who was the son of Amoz, which doesn't make any difference really. Do you remember what the next word was? Isaiah saw what the Lord said. Let's think about that. Isaiah saw, not heard. It doesn't say Isaiah brought the word of the Lord to the people, does it? It says Isaiah saw what the Lord said. That is not a typo. Isaiah saw this living dream. And then Isaiah spoke to the people about it and said, you know what? Jerusalem where the temple is, the house of God, will someday be risen up, and all the nations will say, let's go to Jerusalem and find out what the wisdom is, And from Jerusalem, this God is going to rule the world, and they'll turn swords into pruning hooks, and wow. And, the plowshares, pruning hooks. We say that every Christmas, don't we? Okay. Well, this is what Isaiah saw the Lord saying. And then it ends with that 5th verse. I love it. Okay, people of Jacob, let's go out and live as if we really believed what we were saying. Did you hear that part? Okay, people of Jacob, now I've given you the dream again. We've seen the picture. Let's go out and live as if we thought it was true. That is the definition of hope. It is. How many of you, especially guys, Christmas is coming. So how many of you have something that you're kind of either expecting or, you'd like to see it as part of your Christmas presents? Another toy for guys. How many here are hoping for something for Christmas? Are you? No, you aren't. You're wishing. You're wanting. You aren't hoping. I hope you aren't. because if you are, and if it's like let's say it's a car, that means right now you're living as if you had a car you don't have. Yeah, that doesn't make sense, does it? So, no, we want things for Christmas. We don't hope for things, but we use the word that way all the time, don't we? I mean, it's almost like instead of saying, I really want, I can save my breath by saying just one word, hope. But we need to be careful as religious people about that word hope. Because what it really means is, I am going to live, in fact, I am living as if I honestly believe what I say I believe. So in other words, if I tell another person what I believe as part of my faith, that person should be able to see what I'm saying. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? You see what a difference that is in terms of using that word hope, saying it's part of our themes for this time of Advent. That people should be able to see what it is that we say we believe. What do we say we believe? What are the most important things that the people out there in that world ought to be hearing/seeing from us about our beliefs? What are they? Well, taking care of the poor, love, open and friendly. Those are pretty nice things. It'd be hard to argue with those things. But you're leaving out this big name. It's almost like we're afraid to say it. No. Jesus. Christ. Congregationalists don't say those things except when they're angry. Really? Really? Have you ever told another member of your family or a friend or just somebody because it seemed to fit in with the conversation you were having? For instance, well, why do you guys spend so much of your time and money that we don't have to feed the community every Thursday? Have you ever mentioned the way of Christ, the life of Christ, the call to discipleship of Christ? Have you ever? If I were a betting man, I think I'd win a bunch of money by betting no. Am I right? You did it one time in a very small room. Was there anybody else there? Oh, okay. 4 people, wow. Gee, 4 whole people, and you said that to them. Okay, but is it getting through here? Isaiah, one of the most important of all the prophets. Isaiah, in the 6th chapter of Isaiah, that's the famous thing in the year that King Uzziah died. I saw the Lord high and lifted up and sitting on a throne in the temple. Remember that part? And, you know, all these cherubim and seraphim are flying around. Remember those things? See, Isaiah, he was really big on seeing what God said, seeing what God did, seeing who and what God is. That was really big for Isaiah. That's why the 2nd chapter says Isaiah saw what the Lord was saying. Now, what if some ordained person that you knew told you that you believe that Christ is the way, the truth, and the life? Would you agree that that's what you believe? Okay, I just told you. Would you be able to agree to that? See, I'm not sure that we need to say and show anything more than that. I have little or any use for, and I commend you to think about this, for the creeds that have been developed through all the centuries of the church. I have little, if any, use for formulaic kinds of beliefs that say, because I believe I'm saved. Who cares? Really, you know, or pretending that because I'm a minister, I can hand out that salvation to you and say, you want to be saved, and let me decide whether you are or not. I think that if we say that we believe that Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, and we live as if we believe what we said, that's the definition of faithfulness. That's the definition of the Christian church, the Christian community, of us. And I commend you to think on that. Because these dreams that we hear, especially during Christmas time, Advent time, that come from Isaiah in particular, of the time where all nations live in peace. You know, they're dreams that those people believed in. It got them through times of war. It got them through times of displacement where they were made to move down to Babylon. It got them through times of Assyrian occupation. It got them through times where the Romans were treating them like vassals and kind of toying with them, saying, okay, I'll let you live your way every once in a while, and if you get out of line, I'll just kill you. It got them through all that time because they believed in those dreams and lived as if what they believed was true. That it was their God on whom they should depend, not the political realities around them. That it was their God through whom they should live, not through money or success or whatever else, whatever other words we could use. No, it got them through all those times, and they believed it got them through that. And that's why to this day, faithful Hebrews try to live as if the stories really are true. That's why faithful Hebrews live like they do. My question is, as Christians in a world that doesn't value or use language in the way they did, what is the use of saying to another person what we believe unless we also understand that it's up to us, if we say it, to make it live, to make it alive, to make it visible. I really believe that the Christian faith and message, both those things, I don't see one apart from the other, has to stay alive in this world. I think now as much as ever, maybe more than ever in this world, not just in this country, yes, certainly in this country, but now more than ever, people need to be speaking out and living out that faith. I think more and more of us who understand ourselves to be Christian, especially people like me that are sort of retired and have some time, we need to be getting arrested once in a while because we need to speak out against something or someone that's in power, doing something that we think our Lord would say is absolutely unacceptable. A long time ago now, it seems like, about 15 years ago, only time I ever got arrested. And to this day, I'm sad that it's no longer on my record. But what happened was I get to a new calling, a new pastorate in Hartford, Connecticut. And an important church, at least in the minds of the people around there, that particular church that I became pastor of. And so there was this retirement home / nursing home / rehabilitation center that had originally been started by 5 United Church of Christ churches. Long time ago. It had been started, it had been run very well, become quite successful, became a retirement community and a nursing home and a rehabilitation center, all those things. And it was called, get this, I mean, they were really, really smart about finding a really good name for it, Church Homes. Church Homes Incorporated. Well, Church Homes over the years, the churches had kind of gotten busy with their own survival and things like that, and it went on its merry way to financial success. And one of the ways it did that was by paying the very people who worked there less and less and less. Until now, the wonderful caregivers at that place, when I got to Hartford, were not being paid anywhere near to a living wage. They were the ones who were wiping the rear ends of our parents because we couldn't or we wouldn't. They were the ones who were sitting with people who had no one else left in the world, but they would sit and speak with them and talk to them and read to them and feed them. And they were doing all those wonderful things, and they had to work at 2 and 3 other jobs too, just to pay their own rent. We decided that as churches, and they were still using that name, by the way, Church Homes, Inc., as churches who were some of the founders, we couldn't just sit by and see that happen. And so we joined in the strike that the workers there decided to bring. And not only did we join in, we decided, hey, you guys, you need to be a little bit more forceful about this. So we did a sit-in at one, not the only, but one of the main entrances to the place. And of course, the day we did the sit-in, what do you think the weather did? Yeah, it rained. It still feels wet. So there we are sitting in the entrance. And people had to go from that main entrance all the way around half a block to the back entrance, which is actually the entrance that ambulances and food trucks used anyway, okay? And so we got arrested. And even the arrest was a joke. It was all prearranged, I found out later, with the police. So they bring up this old converted school bus, and then they arrest us, and they put our hands behind us with those plastic ties, Except that I still can't do it because of my shoulders. And so I told him, you can't do that because it just won't happen. And so I said, go ahead and give it a try. So he couldn't get my hands back there, so he put them in front of me. We go into the school bus. We tell him our names, our address, and everything like that. And he said, you're under arrest for disturbing the peace, and here's the day you have to go to court. Well, now, most of you know that I also, at that time, had a law degree, and that for some years I had actually practiced law. And so I thought, oh boy, free publicity. There was a little bit of Donald Trump in me because, see, I knew that if I made my case and maybe a few other people's cases of that arrest go to trial, that the newspaper would put it in there. And not only that, I knew I could represent myself. And of course, what you do is you ask yourself questions that nobody else would bother asking you. Why did you do this? And then I'll go on this long soliloquy about how unfair the pay is. I thought, this is going to be great, And it was only a misdemeanor, by the way. And so I wasn't worried about it. Well, all these people that got arrested that day, probably 40 of us or something like that, we appeared before the judge at the same day and time. And the judge says, I don't care what your plea is. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to do 20 hours of community service. At the end of that time, if I have in writing that you did your community service and did it well, then I'm going to expunge this from your record. Well, 48 of about 50 people thought that was just terrific, and they walked out, and so I'm still standing there. And the judge looks at me and says, who are you? So I told him my name, and I said, I'm one of the people that was arrested. I don't accept that. What do you mean you don't accept that? I want to make a plea. I want to, have my right to trial of my peers. He said, you want a jury trial on a misdemeanor? Do you know that in this court we try rapists and murderers and all this? That's what happened. I tried my best. It didn't work. He expunged my record anyway, and I did a lot of community service. So I'm only using that long-winded example to suggest that I think for all of us there ought to come times like that. We don't have to get arrested. But I think we got to put our lives along with, like the poor you mentioned, Why? Because that's who Jesus said to be concerned about. You shall always have the poor with you, said Jesus. Remember that? Yeah, I'm taking it a little out of context, but still. Jesus never said the poor are going to be gone, but that's who you worry about. That's who we identify with. And we don't. Not enough. Because, you see, if we stand with the poor, the courts, the police, those in power, they don't want to do something to us. We're those good middle-class white people. We pay our taxes, we have jobs or pensions and stuff like that. They don't want to do something to us. And so you see how we could effect some change, not by feeling sorry for poor people, but by declaring out loud that it's wrong what's happening with them and going and living and standing with them until we are paid attention to. Does that make any sense? That's God is still speaking. That's a living word. That would be you and I and all Christians around here being faithful. And to get a little bit Advent-y here at the end of the sermon, that's what it would look like to live hopefully. Hope is a verb. If we want to ever use it as a noun, we ought to say, well, hope is what's inside me that burns, so I live as if I really believed what I said I believed. Let's think about that this Advent as we get ready to celebrate the fact that Jesus, whom we know as the Christ, was actually born into our world and still is there in our lives to call us to make faith real. Those with ears to hear, let them hear what the Spirit is saying to the churches. Amen.